Welcome to the MSP Xperience Game Changers, innovative thinkers in the MSP space. This is a limited edition series presented by Axcient, your trusted partner for comprehensive BCDR solutions for the MSPs. I am your host, Robert Cioffi, the CTO and co-founder of Progressive Computing, a New York-based MSP established in 1993. What is Game Changers? Well, simply put, Game Changers is a video series designed to bring some of the most innovative thinkers in the MSP space into one-on-one conversations with an MSP leader. Our topics are very carefully cultivated to push the envelope for MSPs, to discuss real-world problems we're facing every day, and to hear from industry experts on how to overcome these challenges in interesting and innovative ways. Today's episode is Financial Mastery is greater than, that's the greater than sign, technical knowledge. And our special guest is Kyle Christensen of Empath and K7 Leadership. Welcome, Kyle. Can you please just give us a quick summary on your experience in the space and what you're up to these days?
Oh, geez. Well, you said expert, you said curation, all this stuff. I don't know why you brought me on, but
I've
I'm kind
selected
of,
you for a reason.
yeah, I mean, essentially, I am a cultivation of some happy accidents in the last 20 years of IT services back with Best Buy Corporate. We had this little thing called Geek Squad, had to figure out how do you roll out IT to 1,200 locations. And yeah, learned a lot through that. At MSP picked me up in 2012 as a hired CEO, and I kind of just did a couple rinse and repeat MSP turnarounds through that decade. Got this little thing called EOS implementation certification in 2017, and really obsessed about business strategy. And I learned real quickly that strategy is really a numbers game when you
Yeah.
really boil down to it. And then kind of sum it up, founded an MSP consulting firm called Sierra Pacific Group with a co-founder, Adam Belansky, in 2019.
Okay.
And just kind of from there, have been in the MSP space, trying to help MSPs grow, mature, whatever you want to call it. What I'm up to now is Alex Farling and Wes Spencer. We have this thing called Empath, where we're trying to help MSPs educate their teams, not necessarily just the owners, and
Mm.
doing it in a little bit different of a way. So I don't know. Hopefully that's quick enough and
It
succinct.
it certainly is, and I'm sure a lot of our audience who doesn't already know who you are, or some of the other names that you mentioned will be intrigued enough, at least by the end of this, to go check out Empath MSP. But let's jump into the topic here. You know, we're talking about financial mastery and MSPs, two topics that don't necessarily, let's admit it, right? Don't necessarily mix well together. Numbers, finances. This isn't something many of us have skills in, or many of us started our businesses because of our technical skills or love of technology, and woke up one day and realized that hey, rate times hours worked isn't financial mastery. So, what's your sense of the level of maturity in the MSP world when it comes to their financial knowledge? And why is understanding your numbers one of the most important skills to master? I know that was a mouthful, but I know you can handle it.
Yeah, that there's a lot to pack in there,
Yep.
and it really the reason. So a little bit of a segue before we get to my reasoning, but as I started to really get involved with MSPs, I started to learn that accidental entrepreneur, the as Michael Gerber coined it, the practitioner that wants to share their craft with the world.
Mm,
The whole idea of I found something that I can make money off of and not have a boss, right? That's why
yeah,
a lot of us get going. I'm sure, Robert, you were the same way with
I
yours.
was exactly that 31 years ago.
And what happens is a consultant is easy, right? I know my value is worth time.
Hmm.
However, there's a change that happens be from consultant to services firm or services oriented business, where it's not like you mentioned rate times hour. However, what I learned really early on is we never really grow out of that. See, we talked about in the green room, it was going to start to do that bubble, but we talk about it has to evolve beyond rate times hour, but we don't get out of the mind space of rate times hour.
Yep.
And in economics, there's this thing called economy of scale that a service business has to achieve if it's not going to become a consulting firm. And the economics work a little bit differently because now we have inventory on a shelf, which is our service. that has to then come off the shelf and end up in your customer's hands. And it needs to do it in a way to where my costs can go down and my revenue can go up. That a lot of MSPs never really get into the mind space of thinking of inventory versus my time.
Mm, very interesting. So in that early part of our journeys, let's say for those that are still kind of like, they are kind of, they got a good sense they got a decent sense of their numbers, but they know that they're lacking some skills. How does an MSP owner build their financial skills? Is it peer group involvement? Is it sitting with an accountant more, a coach, YouTube? How do they build their skills?
How do we build our skills? Um, Unpacking a basic understanding of business economics. What does that mean? Profit and loss, balance sheet, having a direction of where do you want those numbers to be. I posted on LinkedIn the other day, making fun of KPIs and finding the right KPIs,
I
because sometimes
remember
we
it.
think,
Yep.
right, KPIs are the answers to my financial understanding.
Yep. Yep.
But the problem that can happen in some peer groups, and I'm sure you've seen this, Robert, in you facilitating peer groups, is we obsess about one KPI when it's really a data point. It's not a performance driver,
Yeah.
it's just a measurement of something in our business.
It's some measurement, right?
And we think some is better than nothing. However, we don't unpack what drivers in our business actually drive the business to a business goal, not an individual goal, not an employee goal, not an owner goal. But let's unpack the success of our business. So let's pick something. If I want to grow my business, what does growth mean? Like Robert, like when you hear I want to grow my business, what do you think of at your stage in understanding?
I mean, I'll just give you what I hear as the typical answers. Well, grow, that means sales, right? And I need leads, right? I need, I just need to get in front of more people so I can sell more.
Yeah, right. It's we think revenue.
Yeah,
Revenue
revenue,
is
exactly. Yep,
revenue is growth. However, we'll go right to the microeconomics of I need leads. That's leads lead to revenue.
right.
But as a business, where is revenue leading you? And why do you want it to go there?
Hmm.
It's growth for the sake of growth, or is it growth for the sake of I have a plan to exit? I have a plan to pay my employees a certain rate. I have a plan to have a business that sustains my own personal objectives of kicking myself upstairs.
Right.
I have a community aspect. It's all those Jim Collin ideas in good to great of my business has to mean something in order
Mhm.
for me to fit that mold.
So very interesting. In order, before we even understand or get to the financial mastery, we have to understand what our end game here is, or what our ultimate goal is here. It sounds like.
And yeah, and that's where I think I started to unpack this a little bit differently than most, Robert, is
Mhm.
I was a hired CEO. I was an entrepreneur. So to me, it was I got hired with the we need to grow the business double within the next 3 years.
Hmm.
Okay. Well, now that I'm getting that as an objective, I don't have the problem of going, where does my business need to be? I just need to figure out how do I hit that mark? So
How
I
we
need to
get there? Yeah.
reverse engineer, right? I'm
Yes.
doing the act of reverse engineering. And that's actually easier than engineering.
Aha. Okay. Right. If you know
So
where you're going, you can work backwards, it sounds like, is what you're saying.
exactly. And then you start to go, okay, what and this it's the old adage of you don't know what you don't know.
True.
And finding the question is half the battle. So if I know I need to get double the size in 3 years, I go, okay, that's $5 million, for example. Okay, now I need to ask the question, how do I get to $5 million? And you start to work backwards of asking the question of, well, I don't know what gets me to $5 million in sales. And so you start to unpack your economics, your finances of, okay, well, how many salespeople do you need to have on staff to sell $5 million worth of goods? How many
Okay.
employees does it take to service $5 million worth of service?
True. Yes. So you have to worry about a lot of different. You have to worry about your costs now going up, or or absorbing new costs that maybe you didn't even have before.
No, exactly. And it's a tough. And I know you and Robert, you and I have talked about this. It's hard to know where to start with the financial conversation and
Hmm.
seeing that as a strategy. And there's some fantastic books out there. Like I really like Mike McCallowitz, Profit First. I think that's a fantastic read.
Hmm.
To succinctly make it a point, he goes into, rather than thinking of it as revenue subtract expenses equals profit,
Hmm.
reverse the logic.
Hmm.
Revenue subtract profit equals expenses.
Oh, very interesting. Just a subtle different change to the equation.
Exactly. And now I think of expenses as a constraint to my business. I have to only spend this much to get here. So now I need to be creative. And going back to that economy of scale thing I talked about at the beginning, now I need to do more with less because I
Right.
don't get any extra expenses.
So that's very interesting because in our business here, over the last couple of years, we've started to really buckle down on not only creating a budget but sticking to that budget, and that's one of the things that we plan out well. We know this is the bucket of money I get to spend, right? And I can't spend more than that. I can't go over that. It's a discipline that we try to hold to because we've done, perhaps unknowingly, we've applied that equation because we've charted out what we want our profitability to be, um, and we manage the budget to our profitability. We protect profitability by either increasing or reducing expenses whenever needed.
Now, you said something important there, though. And I think this gets lost a lot of times of why is profit important? And I know when I ran MSPs before, and I'm sure you had this too, Robert, like your employee's mind or a naive mind will immediately go to it ends up in someone's pocket.
Mm.
But what it doesn't do is say, okay, well, what about the taxes I have to pay?
Oh yeah.
What about what about days of cash on hand? One of my favorite KPIs in finances is how many days of operations do you have right now in the bank if all revenue stops?
Mm. Now that's, I mean, it's unrealistic to think that all revenue would suddenly stop, but why is that sort of a good KPI in your mind?
It's a maturity to know that, say you do have churn. All business has churn. Whenever I hear
Yeah,
MSPs go, "Oh, our clients haven't left us in 7 years," I'm going,
yeah.
"You're gonna have a really rainy day here coming soon, then," because because now you've created a behavior to where I don't need to get new customers because they're just all going to be here.
Yeah.
It's a mature way to run your business because you're keeping jobs healthy. I have the ability to grow my business hell or high water.
Mhm.
And I am not running the business like I ran my own personal expenses when I was in college, living paycheck to paycheck. We all know what that felt like.
Mm.
So having that savings account, I used to try to always keep 60 days at my MSPs, right? So I could shut the lights off 60 days. And if all of our clients fired us, we go, cool, we're all sales reps now.
Yep.
Let's protect our jobs, boys.
But we've got
But
60 days to weather that storm.
correct, right?
Right.
There's a maturity there, but also maybe you want to buy something unexpectedly.
Yep. Well, we're doing that here. Like we've built up, not to make it about us, but we've built up what I call a war chest, not just for operating the business in case of a rainy day, but because we're also thinking of acquisitions, and we know that that's going to take some cash, right? So we want,
Well, and you can be more competitive in your offers when you have more cash than
yes, of
debt,
course, yeah, yeah. So there's,
right?
there's a lot of reasons for us to have that, that bank, so to speak,
Well,
ready to go.
the unicorn hire, that guy that I met at a conference that's just brilliant, and you're sitting there going, I wish I could hire him tomorrow. If
Right.
you have that war chest, then I can take, you would call this a debt play, right? You're
Yeah.
leveraging debt to bring on the next talent to then find revenue to support them. But now I have a business where I don't have to be constrained by money.
Right. You could take more risks that way too, kind of like that example you used about that unicorn hire, right? Or maybe if you wanted to, try some new marketing or lead gen tactics, right? Because you're looking for innovative or creative ways to grow, right? Having that additional cash, at least for us, has helped us to be able to weather when a marketing plan does not pan out well, right?
Which they do, right? Marketing is a 18-month ROI strategy where it takes a long time to figure out if you're going to make a dollar on it.
Yeah.
And I'd rather leverage that than leverage cash flow, another concept that I think sometimes gets missed in MSP life.
Mm.
And I saw Peter Kajawa post on Josh Coulter's post the other day on LinkedIn, two fantastic finance brains, by the way, in our channel,
Hmm.
Peter Kajawa, Josh Kotler. And he made a comment to where a lot of MSPs never do true deferred revenue practices
Yeah.
and accrual bookkeeping, right? Just because
Mhm.
the accrual button is checked in QuickBooks doesn't mean you're doing accrual bookkeeping.
That's right. Yep. We see this problem all the time in our peer groups. They're not
Yep.
reporting their data properly, right? They're realizing revenue all now and costs later, and things are landing in different quarters or months, and you're looking at a P&L, and it's a big jumble.
It looks like a heartbeat. Why?
Yeah,
Because
exactly.
revenue,
A heart
cost,
attack. Yeah.
revenue, cost.
Yeah. Yeah. It's all over
And
the
when you
place.
hear that MSPs were losing money last year at a alarming rate due to professional services,
Mm,
it's directly tied to this because I'm collecting revenue and then collecting costs the next month. And what I'm drawing is profitability with my fingers.
right.
Because what it should be is I customer gives me money, I don't collect it. I do the work and I collect it, and I also collect the cost of the employee.
Right.
Combine those together, I know if my projects are making money or not.
Yeah.
Now, I escaped over the question, and it hasn't fell out of my head, Robert, since you asked me, which is what are the first steps that someone could take to start understanding this financial maturity?
Yes.
Go into YouTube and watch every single video you can on profit and loss strategy and balance sheet strategies.
Hmm.
And why I say that
Yeah.
is just this conversation you and I are having on accrual bookkeeping is completely lost if you don't understand cost of goods really well. If you don't understand general ledger, if you
Yep.
don't understand accounts receivable and how you truly do invoicing based off of, right, when did they pay you versus when you wrote the invoice. And while right now it may not make sense to you because you're watching this going, Kyle, of course I put revenue in this line item. Duh. There's
Right.
going to be a point in the next few months where it's going to bite you in the butt. You're going to go, okay, this all makes sense.
Mm. So it's not only like where it goes, but it's also when it goes. Going back to the deferred revenue and the accrual conversation. My understanding of that, Kyle, and correct me if I'm wrong, is I might collect money, right? Somebody might write me a big fat check, like a deposit, but I can't put that in my revenue bucket. I have to put that in a deferred revenue bucket, which is different, right? That does not show up on my profit and loss statement. That shows up on my balance sheet. And then when I do the work is when I realize that revenue.
Which
And
takes
so,
time, right? A lot of us
yeah,
don't do it because you have to
hard.
process QuickBooks
Yes.
every single day, and it's
Right.
gotta be
Pain in
timed
the
in your
butt.
timesheets,
Yep.
which we all know our engineers are great at timesheets, right?
Yes.
And I think Robert, I gotta give him credit.
Or not.
As much as I like to, uh, poke and prod a little bit in my own content, Paul Dipple really is the person that opened my eyes to a lot of this.
Yeah.
Um, Even though a lot of times he would talk about things that would go way over my head, and I'd be like, I sure he's talking foreign to me. Throughout the years, I went, oh, that's why in what is it, Service Leadership Index, Sleek?
Yes. SLI,
He
service leadership. Yep.
he would give me you like an extra half a point if you did budgeting on the OML. Like you'd go from like a 2.5 to a 3 if you said I do budgeting and I review it.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, I remember, he retired when it was a year or two ago, and I enjoyed listening to him. I mean, he was definitely a very intelligent guy and funny once you got to know him. Uh, but definitely felt like you're always talking to a professor that knew 100 times more than you do. Um, so let's shake it up a little bit. Let's
yeah,
talk about maybe some of the big mistakes that MSPs make financially. I mean, you kind of mentioned a few already, but are there, like you talked about, like realizing revenue when you shouldn't, not using deferred revenue, or are there some other even maybe more basic classic mistakes they're making?
great question. And I honestly I would put the accrual revenue in like a do that in the long term, but don't obsess about it in the beginning
Yeah,
because
don't right. Don't try to do it early if you're just not good at this stuff.
no, exactly. That one, while it helps, it only moves the needle a little bit when it comes to strategy. The
Mm,
big ones that I see, labor just being a big bucket in expenses,
okay.
meaning you should have some. deviation in your labor. Your engineers that do service should be in cost of goods. Your admins should be in operational expenses. Your sales and marketing guys should be a sales and marketing labor cog. You as an owner, I know a lot of us are LLCs. You should
Yep.
still pay yourself a salary as an S corp.
Mm-hmm.
This isn't tax strategy, but you do actually save some money on your taxes if you pay yourself a salary.
Mm-hmm.
But still put it in there, because if you ever do have an exit or a strategy where you want to take debt, they are going to put your salary back into your analysis. So
Right.
it's good to just put some salary on paper and then take the rest of your money through distributions.
Right.
I see that one all the time,
Hmm.
which it leads into the second one, which is either having no strategy in your chart of account structure, meaning your GL codes are either too simplified or, to poke fun at Dipple a little bit, way too elaborate,
Yeah. Yeah.
and you don't match your chart of accounts with your business strategy, and that can be extremely costly to fix down the road. And why it's costly is, someone, once you figure out a strategy you like, they're going to put in a new chart of accounts into your ledger, QuickBooks or Zero, to put
Mm-hmm.
all those GL codes. But you're going to have to go back to your PSA and remap your entire
Oh,
product
all that
catalog to those
mapping.
new GLs.
Yes.
And then you're going to go, I can't see anything for all this work that I just paid for, unless they go through your entire last year and remap every single thing you did.
Right. Okay. So that was the second thing. What do you think is like maybe a third big item?
Ooh, a third one. Um, Not focusing on the profit margins of your 4 or 5 key products.
Ah, profit margin. So we're talking about like, hey, whenever I sell something like a physical thing, like a firewall or a switch, how much I'm marking it up. Is that kind of what you mean? Or do you
Well,
mean?
markup and margin, 2 different concepts, and
Yes.
I
Yeah.
think we do get lost in that, but deeper conversation for another day.
Yeah.
Um, is being able to go into QuickBooks or Xero, whatever you use, and say, "Okay, managed services, what is my actual gross margin of managed services?"
Right.
Not everything as a single line of profit margin. So what I see so many times, that especially in peer groups, is, I make 40% margin. I make 35% margin, right? They'll make these statements.
Yeah.
However, to a younger MSP, what they think is, oh, just set all of my products at 40% margin, because we think in a total average. However, realistic, I mean, Robert, what's your typical margin on hardware?
Well, we shoot for 25 points. Like that's what we're looking for. So
But
we're
some vendors,
marking it up by 33%.
because what do they tell you MSRP is? 15%, 12 points?
Yeah, I mean, it honestly depends on what we're selling, but it's all over the map.
And for a young MSP, we may just sell it at 12 points, right? Because
Right.
that's what the list on it is on Dell.com. So I'm going
Right.
to match the price,
Yes.
because we're afraid the customer is going to shop us.
Yeah.
However, if it's going to be 15, even 20, law of average says then I need 60% for my MSP agreement to average 40%.
Right. To get it to pull that number up, of course.
And if I don't have the ability, whether it's in my PSA or my ledger, to say what my true product margin is, whether that's a service product, a bundled product, a
Mhm.
hardware product, then you're not going to be able to make strategies in your business on how either to improve efficiencies, right? Lower cost,
Right.
or increase prices. That's the only 2 ways you make more money on a product: charge more or do less.
Yep. Yep.
So that would
Okay.
probably be my third big one.
So three great pieces of advice, and simply because we don't have, I wish we could spend 2 hours talking about this, but we don't have that. Um, let's switch gears a little bit because you and I tend to maybe, I don't want to say beat up, some of the younger, smaller MSP, or even some MSPs that have been around a long while, but just never really put a lot of time and attention on their financial mastery. Not everybody has to have a CPA or a PhD and all of this stuff. But there are also many MSPs that may be listening right now that fancy themselves as pretty smart. Maybe they even have some of the chops to back up their financial skills, or they just have a good enough mentality. What suggestions would you have for them to, take it to the next level? Does this get into some of the more advanced things like, deferred revenue, budgeting and forecasting, which I know are two different things? Like, Where do you see some of the maybe more mature financially well off, not financially well off, but financially skilled people taking their game next?
Okay, let me give you a good, better, best. Good, you already mentioned it. Accrual bookkeeping with deferred revenue for your professional services product.
Hmm.
You just got to start doing that
Yeah.
because you do not staff professional services the way you staff managed services.
Okay.
Longer conversation, but that's just kind of the TLDR. Second, budgeting and forecasting. Pick one or the other. I'm a big more of a fan of budgeting than forecasting because I can tie it to financial compensation. And then third, converting your leadership team to a variable pay structure based off of financial performance.
Mm, okay. So you're really aligning the top people in the organization to how well they perform. And I would imagine too, that also leads back to strategy in terms of business planning. Like, hey, what are we setting out to do? And can we actually hit that, right? And perform.
Well, and if you look at big organizations, Robert, and I know so many MSPs are afraid of variable pay just because it takes some maturity to get there.
It does.
And,
I
and
remember when we kind of made that transition. It was a little scary, but you can do it and it can be done.
well, and you will have employees push back and you will have employees leave you over it. And you just kind of got to get over that cycle.
Yep.
But when you start to align everybody in the organization to that $5 million goal that I had when I got hired as a CEO,
Hmm.
every single employee had something to gain if we hit that target.
Right.
If I had to manage the team and not tell them the number one goal was to grow by $5 million, I would have to give them another reason on why we need to grow. So now I'm creating this air of secrecy in our business on why I'm saying that we need utilization to be here and product margin to be here, and no one has a say in pricing. If you remove those layers and you just go, guys, we need to hit $5 million. That's what our board says we need to do.
Uh-huh.
And we all already know what we have to win from it because the
Right.
sales guy is going to make a hell of a commission.
Yeah.
The service guy is going to make a hell of a variable pay model because gross margins are going to have to support that sales team that he brings on.
Yep.
And then me as the hired CEO, right? I have equity at play where I'm actually going to earn extra equity from that growth target, which then has its own exit valuation. Well, now we're all aligned. Now we don't have to beat around the bush. We can just
Right.
say what we need to say.
I think there's the key word in what you just said, right? Like towards the end, it's about alignment. It's about making sure everybody understands what the big picture is and how we all how the work we do all affects each other. I've seen, by the way, in some organizations where the sales and marketing teams, or I should say the sales team, are at odds with operations, right? And I think when you put numbers out there like that, there is a way to get alignment within the organization so that everybody's rowing in the same direction. Would you agree?
Yeah, that's why I did the good, better, best thing. Because if I know my product margin and I know my budget and people are on a variable pay model, everyone in company could theoretically win if we hit a financial target.
Right, right.
And now I can pay people fairly, right? For being a badass.
So let's talk a little bit about maybe some of the dangers, especially if you have like a specific example of, obviously I don't want you to name names here, Kyle, but like have you seen like, somebody go off the deep end or, drive over a cliff because they've ignored their finances or their financial, just sort of put their head in the sand when it comes to their financial mastery?
A lot. Eh,
Unfortunately a lot, right?
I mean, you see it all the time. It's yeah, I'm honored to be in a position to where I talk about this stuff a lot. But the sad part at times is how many people send me messages on LinkedIn with like, "Hey, I'm about to lose my MSP. I'm about to lose my house because I leveraged a lien against it."
Oh boy.
Um, because they think good service will dig themselves out of a hole.
Right. And it won't necessarily do that, will it?
Well, Robert, I mean, you and I have talked about this, and I would love for you to say it is it not payroll the scariest thing of an MSP owner's business?
Oh, it's totally the scariest thing. I mean, I worry about it far less these days, but everyone's like, we just lost a big account, right? Like actually two in a row. And it was, listen, we all go through it for various reasons. and it starts to get you thinking about like, crap, like, are we going to be good now? We're going to be more than good because I looked at our numbers just to make sure. But that's the thing, like, we look at them closely and manage these things. But I remember the days when you always just sweated payroll constantly.
And the thing though is you either have to manage that off of feel or off of knowing where you are.
Yeah.
And once you have that customer leave you, you start to obsess about, oh, I have to give the most amazing service to every other customer I have.
Hmm.
Well, churn's the nature of your business. So when you take your eye off the ball of growth and you just think no one will churn, now I'm not getting more efficient. I'm spending more money, more costs on my customers, theoretically. And I'm not paying attention to the margins that satiate my business just to maintain growth. Because, like, let's say most average business in the United States, they have anywhere between 1 and 1.5% churn for MRR.
Hmm.
Doesn't matter if you're a CPA firm, MSP, that's just what the national average is.
National average. Yep.
Which means I have to grow 2%, maybe a little bit more, just to maintain my business.
Yeah. Just to stay even, so to speak. Right.
So if I think that way and I start to deliver more costs to my customers and I raise and I lower my margins, now where is that extra cost coming from? It's coming off the bottom line or it's coming out of the bank account.
Mm.
So you start to get yourself into this dangerous situation of obsessing about service quality while you're not growing. And the next thing you know, a year down the road, 2 years down the road, 3 years down the road, you're like those businesses that you see on I don't know if you ever watched the what's the show where the guy flips bars?
Oh, yeah, I know who you're talking about. Robert, I'm
Uh,
drawing a blank on his name. He's kind of big muscular guy too, right?
People watching this right now are going, "You idiots! This is
Yeah,
his name."
exactly. I don't remember the guy's name.
John Tafford. John Tafford.
Oh, okay, yeah, all right.
And right, they're going, "Oh, we're $300,000 in debt," and you're like, "Holy shit!
Wow, yeah,
How are you $300,000 in debt when you're a bar where you're very transactional heavy, right? Like you're
yeah,
not waiting for people to pay your bill that you invoice them."
yeah.
But yeah, it's not making decisions, a little bit with heart, a little bit with vision, but a
Mhm,
lot of bit of reality, and your finances are going to be the number one reality
right.
check you have.
So, would you advise if, if you're feeling like, like butterflies, I don't really know what I'm doing, like, I listen to Kyle and Robert and, I'm convinced I got to do something, I don't know what to do. Like, is the first step like, maybe get with your accountant and help get the help that you uh, need just to get your book straight and get some basic understandings. Would that be a good first step, Kyle?
It would be a good first step. Like have your CPA reality check you. Now, eventually you'll learn, Robert, like you and I have, that CPAs don't always give the best financial advice for
Yeah.
business strategy, right?
Yeah.
They give you tax strategy.
Yep.
There's a difference. But they're going to at least let you know like why they do their bookkeeping the way they do, how they discovered the chart of accounts that they have, right? And if they
Right.
tell you
The
we're just
fundamental.
using the ones we're just using the ones in QuickBooks, that
Yeah.
tells you enough to like, hey, maybe I should reach out to a service leadership or True Methods to look at what their chart of account structures are. Just
Right.
Google MSP chart of accounts. You'll find templates online.
Hmm.
Um, so that would be a good start. Actually, as much as I wish there was more resources, service leadership does actually have a pretty good financial mechanism.
They do actually have some great resources. I mean, full disclosure, I'm an IT Nation Evolve peer group facilitator. So, I've been also
A
a
little
member for
biased.
years. So I've been, neck deep in that stuff for the last 14, 15 years. So, uh, but whether it's that system or some other resources, it's really important that you get connected to something like that. And SLI is a great, if you're fishing for something, that would be something for you to take a look at. Would you agree, Kyle?
I would, and if you're feeling lost and you're like, oh, these guys are just shills for service leadership,
Yeah,
which
and I make nothing off
definitely
of it.
not.
So, yeah, of course not.
Reach out to me or you on LinkedIn, and I'll kind of give you the hard and
Yeah,
dirty. I'm trying to think in the moment of a podcast. Sometimes your
right.
brain doesn't work as fast as your mouth works.
Yeah.
But it's I'm on YouTube. I've been trying to do a lot of financial videos, especially on this topic. Like I did like a how I approach budgeting vision. I did one on how to structure a sales plan for 24.
Hmm.
Just little things that are out there, but these aren't MSP specific. These strategies, these are very general when it comes to using finances to manage your business.
Hmm.
So don't be afraid to go on YouTube and watch general financial strategy videos. Harvard Business Review does a lot of good ones.
Yep, I've seen some
Um,
of those. They're very good. Yeah.
what's they're called? Starts with a B. Who's the big consulting firm? Uh, McKinsey does some
Yeah.
really good videos on
Yes.
YouTube.
Yes. Yes.
Traditional business consulting is very financially driven. So if you ever go into big enterprise and they bring a consulting bro in, as Wes would call them,
Yeah.
this is all they do is talk finance strategy.
Yeah. Well, Kyle, I mean, we can go on and on and on, but unfortunately, we're out of time. So we've spent our budget in terms of time today. Haha. And so that brings us to the end of our discussion on financial mastery, greater than technical knowledge. Kyle, thank you again for joining me today and helping lift our industry by sharing your wisdom and experience. One more time, how can people reach or find you?
Yeah, definitely. So LinkedIn /IN/Kyle CHX is my LinkedIn handle. On YouTube, K7 Leadership. And then a lot of the videos in Empath, I gotta say, I'm starting to do a lot of financial ones. Well, maybe with some other guy's good looking face that's on this webinar is going to be featured in.
Maybe.
We're going to be covering we're going to be covering those topics, and I'm bringing in a lot of finance experts as well on the CPA side, on the accounts receivable side.
Yeah,
So
that's
our
great.
catalog of finance education will be building as we build out this Empath learning platform.
Well, thanks to everyone for tuning into our series, Game Changers, Innovative Thinkers in the MSP Space, graciously presented and sponsored by Axcient. If you would like to learn more about their awesome BCDR products and solutions, contact sales or sign up for a free trial by visiting their website, www.axcient.com. Just let them know that Robert sent you. Until next time, live long and prosper.
Later.